get started because we have a full agenda today. You're attending Learning with Lewis. You are not alone. Faculty support and outreach in textbook transformations. This is a joint project of Affordable Learning Georgia and Affordable Learning Louisiana. We have two panelists today. Beth was unable to join us due to a family emergency, but I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Deanna Cozat of the University of Georgia. She's the coordinator of Open Educational Resources at the Center for Teaching and Learning, and Jeanne Pavy of University of New Orleans, the Scholarly Communications and Collection Development Librarian. The format we're going to use today is a panel format, and so we have some questions for each of our panelists. I'll put them up on the screen and read them just so we, for visual impairment, so we have them recorded. And then our panelists will address them, and if anyone in the audience wants to share their experiences with those questions, we'll allow time for that as well. So I'm going to start by asking Deanna to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about the work she's doing at Georgia.
Hi, thank you so much, Carrie. Can you hear me okay right now?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Perfect. So I work at the University of Georgia, and I am coordinator of Open Educational Resources. And what that means is I actually spend a lot of my time on project teams where we have faculty on campus who are looking to either currently use an OER or move in the direction of using an OER. And I try to help them both with the course redesign, the locating of a resource, and then actually conducting research on what they find. So I end up kind of doing a lot of different things with that. And before I was in this role, I was actually a faculty member using OER in the College of Education. So it's been really nice to kind of straddle the faculty perspective as well as now being more on the administrative side.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeanne, tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Well, I'm the Scholarly Communications Librarian at UNO. I know a lot of you are librarians listening in, and we have been engaged in various open access initiatives for the past several years, including the launch of our repository. And we've been interested in open educational resources under that broad umbrella of open access in higher ed. And really the Lewis Regents Initiative last year really helped us sort of push into this a little more. So we participated in that initiative, used the funding to start working with some of our faculty on replacing textbooks with OER or free to students licensed material, as well as starting to purchase electronic versions of course texts where they were available. And so we've taken some steps, and then we had worked with our Center for Teaching Innovation. It's a new center on campus, and Beth Blankenship, who was going to be another panelist, unfortunately unable to participate today. She worked with us to conduct a sort of brown bag forum this spring where we invited faculty who received the grants to talk about the difference it made in their teaching, etc. So that's what we've done at UNO, and I'm very interested in this. I think it's a great initiative, and I'm very excited to have the conversation with Deanna and others in the state who are interested.
Thank you. Okay, so first up, let's just talk about affordable learning initiatives. What does that mean, and why should we care about this work? I think Jeanne's going to take this.
Oh, okay. Either way, Deanna probably can speak from much more experience, but I mean, I think the main reason that we care about it is that it makes a big difference in student success. in a lot of ways. Most obviously, just that they have what they need to succeed in courses. And we know that some students buy the textbooks, but many of them don't. And that's a major barrier to success. Textbook initiatives and transformations in a basic way sort of level the playing field for students. If everyone has access to the course materials, everybody has that basic access from day one in the classroom, and it should be that way. And so this is a way to try to ensure that. And other advantages, pedagogical advantages for teachers who have more freedom to implement the class the way they want to, and so forth. Deanna can maybe address that further, but I think the main goal is to give students what they need to succeed and make sure everyone has a engaging experience in the classroom, and free sources are free or nearly free or affordable sources are a way to do that.
I think we look at it from a couple of different perspectives. One would be cost. So the College Board, their statistics are that the average undergraduate student right now is spending $1,200 a year on textbooks. So we're talking about $4,800 over the course of a four-year undergrad degree. And that's just a lot of money on top of tuition and fees. And then a lot of the work that I've been doing lately has kind of looked at even within specific majors where we see further costs. So, for example, in my background with education, working with pre-service teachers, there are additional costs between our state ethics exam, our state licensure exam, liability insurance, and so on, the portfolio software they have to purchase. We're talking about an additional $1,000 of cost for them. So college has just gotten very expensive. And so I think it's really nice that when you start looking at where we can cut costs, particularly as state legislatures maybe decrease their state funding. I don't know if that's happened in Louisiana, but that's definitely happened in the state of Georgia for us. It's a really nice way to try to offer student savings where they might not see it anywhere else. So obviously cost is kind of one of the first compelling reasons why we care about this. And then I think too, is also just retention and how are you setting students up to complete college, to stay in courses, and to kind of just follow through on that program. A lot of different states now are offering different kind of financial incentives where the state legislature is tying student retention rates in universities to their funding. And so it's really interesting to look at how OER can kind of offer a path to help with that. We know that about 30% of students never purchase a textbook in a course, and so obviously like that third of students is going to be a little behind if they don't have the book the first day. And we also know that this can be particularly problematic for students who are on Pell Grants or receiving any other needs-based funding. Typically, if you have a student who is in that situation, they may not receive their funding or their additional student loan money until 3 to 4 weeks into the semester. And given the high cost of textbooks, this can mean that they're just not going to have them for the beginning part of a course. And so again, you start to see more withdrawals and more failures and repeats in college courses. So we're seeing some good data, not just in the state of Georgia, but also nationally coming out that when students do have access to materials on the first day, and all students have access, that it's making a difference in whether or not they're going to remain in the class. So I think as we just kind of look at our current higher education climate, OER is a really important part of that discussion because it can kind of hit at these different things that are affecting our campuses.
Fantastic, thank you. And I just want to acknowledge Jeff Gallant is actively pushing some documents to you all in the chat as they're being referenced. And Jeff is is the Visiting Program Officer for Open Ed Resources at Galileo, the Affordable Learning Georgia initiative. Okay, so we talked quite a bit about student-centeredness of affordable learning, but there are definitely faculty benefits as well, and I'll invite our panelists to share some thoughts on how faculty directly benefit.
I can jump back in on that one. Well, we also know a little bit about that typically when we talk about like innovative teaching instruction or how instructors teach and what they do, that we see kind of a plateau after about 3 to 5 years, that teachers kind of are very innovative and then they sort of peak after this time. And so a lot of what we've tried to do at the Center for Teaching and Learning is use OER and leverage that to be a point of disruption in this potential innovative plateau of people's teaching. So we have actually tried to target faculty on campus who are already really good at what they do and actually try to work with them to redesign the course using an OER as a means to facilitate just kind of more engaged teaching, perhaps more empirically based teaching methods and ways that they can kind of improve their course that way. And the other research that we're seeing, it shows that this is actually really positive and that when teachers use an OER, like something that's already put together like OpenStax, or especially if they compile and create something new as an OER, that just that sort of disruption makes students feel like the faculty are more engaged. And so that's a really positive outcome for students if they feel like faculty are really trying to push it and be more innovative in their instruction.
Thank you. Well, I'll just pause for a second here. If there are any faculty that have participated in this type of work, want to share either via chat or over the audio how you've benefited directly.
I'll just chime in real quickly secondhand. This is Jeanne speaking again from UNO. Something that one of our faculty related, he came from an institution recently, he's now at UNO, but he came from an institution where they had moved to 0 textbooks. And he talked about what an upheaval this was for the faculty, good and bad, but personally he talked about the sort of epiphany that he had, along with others who worked on these task force to move people to 0 textbook, of realizing how much the textbooks had sort of defined the disciplines for them and structured how they think, how they approach the discipline. And so there's so much of a conversation about the discipline that's sort of in the hands of the textbook to some degree, and that taking that away was empowering and also sort of scary, because then you have to sort of provide that. And he just talked about what a transformative experience it was to kind of reconceptualize the course and how the discipline can be presented, you know, when unfettered, you know, just completely from scratch in a way, and very positive experience overall. So I wish he were there to explain it better than I could, but I wanted to pass that along, that what he shared with us at the panel we had recently.
Yeah, and I would completely agree with that perspective, that when I was able to use an OER in my class, that it was really freeing to then examine everything that I was teaching and say, okay, does this fit? Does this fit? Do I want to include this? Do I not want to include this? And I feel like I was really able to hone in more on exactly what I wanted my students to know, because there were a few subtopics, I guess, that I was including, and when I was like, I don't even really know why we're talking about this. And then once I started switching to the OER, I was able to go back and go, okay, this was a sidebar in the textbook that I had been using before, and that was the only reason it was kind of even being covered in the class. And so I found it really freeing as well, just to be able to say, okay, what do I really want my students to know, and what resources can I use to leverage to make that happen?
Thank you. Okay, let's talk a bit about the relationship between open access publishing and open educational resources.
I'll speak to this initially because this is an issue that relates, as I said before, to some larger issues that our library has been working toward with open access publishing generally. And to me, the important key element is that both of these represent attempts by the Academy to take back control, if you will, or ownership or authority over the scholarly record and the teaching tools associated with it. And I think for many of us who are advocates for open access, we see that as aligning, the fundamental mission of higher ed, to teach, to promote knowledge with our actual publishing practices. They're much more in line with what we want to do. They achieve our goals more closely. So I see open education resources serving that same goal, sort of another side to that. And, you see that institutional repositories, which have been used to share and disseminate faculty scholarship, also being used in many cases to share these tools, teaching tools and teaching objects. And it's all part of the move toward openness. And I would also say, in some ways, a movement of seeing both scholarship and teaching as more dynamic, collaborative efforts that sort of underlies and a lot of what's going on is that they are not static objects. These things, they are adaptable and usable, shareable, etc. So so they're both all participating in this kind of reconceptualization of scholarly communication and teaching and learning.
Fantastic, thank you. We've talked at this point some about the what and the why of affordable learning, and I know a lot of you are really interested in the how, and so we're going to move on to some questions about how we as librarians, faculty, instructional designers can start working in this area. So the first question is, what are some ways to promote textbook transformations?
I think the best way to do it is really financially, and I know that's not always possible, but I think Affordable Learning Georgia has been an amazing partner for us because they've been offering textbook transformation grants to faculty around the state, and just providing kind of some money to compensate faculty for their time to make this change is really positive. It's a much easier sell to go talk to a faculty member and say, like, hey, we really think you should consider this, and we will help you write a grant to get some funding to make this happen. And then because, with funding, we're talking about a limited number of grants that are available, we try to be very strategic at UGA to think about, okay, who are our really stellar faculty and also faculty who would be good advocates if they started working on this project. So we try to think about people whose voices would be recognized and respected among their colleagues within the university as well. And by doing that, for example, our biology department now, for majors and non-majors, every single student is using an OER who takes intro bio, except for students with one faculty member who's a rehire, and he's about 84, and he has talked to us, but he is not interested in playing along with OER at this point. But everyone else is using that, and I think that's a really good testament to just the power of the voices of faculty to be able to say, no, I use this, and it really was at least as good as what we had before, and it's not going to cost the students money. So I think, you know, if you have funding available, and then if you can be strategic about how you leverage that to get faculty involved around the campus, it can be really powerful.
Just to piggyback on what Deanna said, the Lewis grants, the little sort of micro grants that they offered this past year, didn't seem like very much money. You know, we had about $1,000, and most of the initiatives that I'd read about offered faculty at least $1,000 to participate in an initiative to transform their textbook, either to create an OER or to, you know, adopt other OERs. And so I wasn't sure how it would work to just have that little amount of money. But in fact, what we ended up doing was giving really small grants to the faculty who didn't actually create an OER, but they kind of used a combination of open materials and licensed content just to give their students free access. And we only were able to give them $250, which really sounds like almost nothing, but I did have them, a couple of them told me, one of them said, you know, and I was kind of apologetic, I'm sorry, we only have $250. We use the rest of the money to actually buy ebooks to replace classroom texts, and we tried to spread the money around a bit. But one of the faculty members said, you know, I was wanting to do this. I knew that I could. I knew that it was possible to find good material out there, and I kind of was aware of it. And that $250 was kind of a nice little push. She said, I should do it. This was kind of just what it took to get her to do it. So you don't need, you know, a lot of money. It would have been nice to have more and to be able to offer more. And we may have been able to entice people to actually create OERs with more money. But and then another person told me kind of a similar thing, and almost, you know, almost that she appreciated that it was a recognition of something that she was choosing to do. She was probably going to do it anyway for her students because she thought the textbook cost would be prohibitive. This was a very expensive textbook in business, but I think it was almost like more of a recognition and a reward for doing, rather than a real compensation for her time. So anyway, that's a long way of saying that even if you don't have a large pot of money to do a major initiative, it sort of just recognizes these efforts the faculty are doing, and that allowed us, because we did it over 2 semesters. We have now 4 faculty who have done this, and we were able to tap some of them for our forum that we had last month to start talking about it, and that was valuable. And then some other things that, you know, we haven't necessarily done at UNO, but I'm aware that other institutions have done, especially LSU has been very successful in identifying assigned textbooks and pushing out their e-version to the classrooms, and we've tried to do that on a smaller scale as well. Offering to buy licenses if we don't already own the e-text. Another thing that I've seen, well, Affordable Learning Georgia created videos to highlight those faculty who have been doing this. We saw it yesterday at the e-learning conference, and then I can't remember the institution, but they created a Textbook Heroes website. It's very nice, and it just has a picture of the faculty member and how much money they saved, you know, the course, how many students were affected, and so it's just a way of kind of showing this is happening, and to get other faculty to be aware that some of their colleagues are successfully finding ways to replace traditional commercial textbooks. But I think, you know, having grants, because it not only actually achieves the transformation in the classroom, it creates a way to start the conversation with the faculty who, even if they don't participate, they start to be aware that there's a priority. Someone's putting money behind this. In this case, you know, the regents, and that in itself is useful. It's a message that this is valued and worth faculty time and so forth. So I think that the grants, however big they are, or how many you can dole out, start the conversation as well as actually start to achieve that transformation.
Thank you. And we've touched on this some, but Deanna, can you describe a little bit more about the incentives that ALG is using to encourage faculty to participate in OER initiatives?
Sure, and Jeff, please feel free to chime in. Jeff is an official ALG person. But I first got started with a round one project, which was a small grant. It was just $10,800 that I was able to use to kind of offset my time as a faculty member and also pay for an instructional designer to help me with a website that we put together to use for my students instead of a traditional textbook. And we implemented this last spring. And I did this with about 100 students. And so that was really nice. It was something I was interested in anyway, saving students money, maybe doing something a little more customized for the class. And so it was enough money to definitely get my interest and get me thinking about it. In subsequent rounds, so like round 2, round 3, round 4, and round 5, people had the opportunity to propose projects that would either be kind of smaller in scale, so maybe just impacting one instructor and one class, sort of still in that $10,000 range. And then there were also opportunities for teams to look at department-wide initiatives or larger scale class initiatives with multiple faculty members, up to $30,000. And so I've had the opportunity to work on 3 of those projects. And so that's been really nice, because with that much money, you can really expand the team and expand the number of faculty who are participating as content experts in the creation of new materials, or as just faculty who are going to work with what was created. A lot of the teams we pulled in either instructional design help, or in our case, Center for Teaching and Learning Assistance, to just offer additional support to faculty who are looking to make those changes. And I know a lot of other teams have used librarians as well to kind of create some other options with that. So by having kind of this formalized grant process, and then, you know, in particular that for faculty members, you know, funding is just such a big part of the expectations on them. I think it's a really good way to kind of get them involved, pique their interest, and be willing to kind of take on that kind of project.
Yeah, I think that Deanna really described that very well. We've been expanding a little bit when it comes to scale and trying to enable bigger teams or multiple campuses, or multiple courses, multiple faculty for those courses, or department-wide transformations through these bigger grants. There are $30,000. These are $5,000 maximum per faculty member, and a little bit of funding included in each grant for travel, because we do a kickoff meeting at the beginning of every round of grants to make sure everybody's on the same page, but especially to get them to collaborate, to talk to each other. Sometimes teams get together for the first time at a kickoff meeting, and for teams to talk amongst each other to either talk about maybe the lessons learned on one side, or maybe somebody has an idea over in something like physical education for someone who is teaching psychology. It's really cool. It's a sharing of ideas. Another incentive we provide are textbook transformation awards. Now, these are selected by our campus champions, we have one at each of our institutions. They're a faculty member who is basically in charge of Affordable Learning Georgia advocacy on the campus, along with a library coordinator. So there is a librarian involved at every institution, and I will give you a list of those. Let's go there. And they are, so the champions select one person or one grant team or one team of people for an award, and we presented them online at Celebrate Open USG, a really big web event featuring our Chief Academic Officer and Executive Vice Chancellor, along with administrators, faculty members, department heads, and just a huge combination of people reporting success in OER. So yeah, we have both monetary incentives and recognition incentives, and we really want to make sure we get across that there is a support system there for anyone who wants to pursue this type of OER exploration. And these types of web events, I think, really help.
Thank you, Jeff. We're going to skip one because I believe we've covered it pretty well. But I want to talk about partnerships and how do you all identify those partners to help you develop your ideas and promote discussion on campus?
I think for us at UGA, it really is trying to look at faculty who we already have a relationship with at the Center for Teaching and Learning, so faculty who we know are interested in improving their teaching and are willing to kind of take some steps and try something new. So those are the ones that we have initially approached about partnering with us on these different projects. And again, they kind of know that they're going to be the faculty members who would be willing to stand up at a department meeting or who hold positions on university council or the university senate and could actually say like, hey, I've done this in my class, it went really well. So I know that for us, that's kind of been our approach is much more selective and much more targeted rather than trying to hit all faculty, you know, via a listserv or an email or something like that. We've really tried to be strategic with people we already have relationships with.
I'd say here at UNO, we sort of did a combination. I mean, again, mentioning Beth Blankenship and the Center for Teaching Innovation, who just is an obvious partner because when we see the mission of that unit on campus, you know, to help faculty improve their teaching and find new ways to teach online, it was just such an obvious natural partner for any kind of initiative having to do with incorporating open text and electronic text into the classroom. But the faculty are, I think, harder to identify for us. But I would say that the combination of the outreach we did in informing them about this grant last spring and summer was very key, because when we sent that out, we offered the small stipends for adopting OERs, but we also offered to buy textbooks if we could, and we had a lot of faculty respond. I think a lot of them were unaware of OERs, and they didn't exactly know maybe what we were talking about with that part of the grant, but they understood, you'll buy the textbook for my class, and we had a lot of response, and unfortunately, many of those texts were in the sciences or professional degree programs like business and engineering, where there wasn't even an option for the library to license a text, or traditional textbook publishers. So when we had to tell them, sorry, we can't, there's no library, you know, option, we could say, we just took that opportunity to say, please consider maybe for a future semester looking at these open textbook sites, and we're happy to work with you and learn more. So just little seeds planted there. I think were helpful. And then again, when we did the forum in the spring and we sent out invitations to that, I had several faculty contact me, even if they couldn't come, and said, you know, we're very interested. We think this is important, what you're doing. One of them is the chair of freshman English, and they have a contract to use a certain textbook for a certain number of years, but she told me that they might want to rethink that. She's very interested in looking at that and thinking of doing something open, you know, when this contract ends. And so I thought that was very important. I had other faculty just individually say, can you help me find something for this course? I'm looking for something open, and I think that's a great role for librarians. We are very attuned to finding resources that fit the curriculum. We always do that for, you know, purchase materials, and we can do that in the open arena as well. Find those you know, those markers of quality and peer review and so forth to help direct faculty to what we think might be the best sources for them to consider. And that's, I think that's a lot of the, we haven't gotten to maybe barriers, but I think knowing, as I think Deanna or Jeff mentioned, knowing that there's some support for helping you move this way, that there are people on campus who are thinking about these things and helping to provide, again, provide support, provide help, guidance, to implement, and you're not just left on your own to do it is key. Anyway, I just wanted to say that just doing the publicity for the grant and for this event we've gotten some conversation going with some faculty who seem to be interested in trying to move that way, and that's just how it's happened here for us.
Jeanne, and you started to address, you started your segue into the next question for me about the skill sets that librarians have that make them particularly good partners in this type of project.
Okay, yeah, I'll be glad to speak from my
add some more on there.
Sure. I think that, as I mentioned, you're sort of oriented toward you know, resources that fit the curriculum and evaluating resources. We're all, those of us who are liaison librarians are pretty well attuned to what's taught in our departments, and to some degree exactly what, you know, what the faculty teach. And so we're in a good position to assist with identifying sources. We can also help, and I think this is particularly important when you start to really adopt or create OERs, to consult on copyright and licensing issues, especially since we have moved into open access activities in our repository. We're very attuned to copyright issues and have expertise in that area that I think will help faculty make decisions about how to use material and how to license anything they do create, how to make it available. We also have a facility with LibGuides. A lot of us use that platform, and sometimes that's a good platform outside of a course management system for offering access to some sources. Obviously, the course management system is probably the default place to link things and to provide access, but where appropriate, we have lots of other platforms, the repository as well, for actually housing an actual created or published work. And then, you know, when those faculty who do want to actually create a textbook or create a learning object that they want to license, you know, again, the repository, we can provide print-on-demand support, ISBN registration, things like that, that since we've started to be involved in the publishing, open access publishing a little bit, we have some skills and knowledge to offer in that area as well.
Great, and I want to point out that Jeff posted a link to the LSU e-textbook project, and I think we might have a couple of LSU representatives here. I'll put you all on the spot. If any of you have a microphone, maybe you could share some of your thoughts on librarians being engaged in reducing costs of textbooks for students. And if not, everyone, please go take a look at a link to their e-textbook page. They are doing a phenomenal job. I think they have $1.4 million currently in estimated savings directly to students through their e-book purchasing program. Okay, our next slide, who else can support reducing student textbook costs? What other advocates are out there, or practitioners even?
I think it's been really positive. For us on campus at UGA, we'll hit almost $2 million in textbook savings for UGA students over the last 3 years this summer. And that's a big enough number that it's caught the attention of our university president, who included and mentioned something about OER in his State of the University address in January. And so I think just kind of promoting that and helping to get the word out to stakeholders. When he mentioned that, we talked to his office later, and he said that they had actually been getting phone calls and emails from parents of students who were saying, hey, thank you so much for supporting these projects and supporting the initiative. And I think, you know, if alumni who can control their donations and can speak with their money a little bit, they can be a really powerful advocate as well. And then I also wanted to mention, which I didn't say before, is we've had a really strong partnership with OpenStax College out of Rice University, who has free textbooks that are peer-reviewed that they've already put together. And a lot of what can make a transition easier to faculty is if you can show them something like an OpenStax textbook where it's already there and already together, because to ask them to switch in that kind of scenario is a much different ask than if you're having to ask them to create from scratch or curate new materials that they might want to use. And so I think even having really good external partnerships like that can be helpful as well.
I wanted to mention a webinar I watched about a month or so ago. I can't remember, I think it might have come from one of those ACRL choice webinars where Springer presented on how they work to, usually you don't think of publishers as partners for textbook transformations, but in this case, these were course texts, you know, probably not traditional textbooks, but in science and technical fields, where Springer had helped contact faculty and let faculty know what the library owned that they might want to consider using. So in this case, you know, Springer wants faculty to assign their text. They want their text to get used. So that the publisher actually had a list of faculty who had expressed interest in learning more about Springer publications, and they said, hey, let us tell these faculty about the text you already own, the ebooks you already own, and they sort of generated some faculty, or perhaps influenced faculty to consider assigning those as text. So perhaps a somewhat unlikely partner, you know, commercial book publisher in this case. And then, you know, bookstores, you do read about bookstores serving as partners in these initiatives, sometimes just helping to make faculty aware of alternatives, listing them for faculty alongside the books that they would actually sell, and in some cases providing grant funds contributing toward these initiatives at some institutions. So I think even maybe somewhat unlikely partners can see their role in these kinds of efforts. I'd be surprised. I was.
Okay, now we're all convinced to take up this work. Can you tell us how much lead time is needed to effectively transform a class? What are some of the steps, and who should be involved at which points?
I think for us, you know, with the round one projects from Affordable Learning Georgia, I found out that I had received the award in October, and I had to be ready to go to implement with my class in January. and that was not quite enough time. So when we started with our round 2 projects, we tried to allow lead time of at least 1 semester prior to implementation, just to make sure that whether it was putting together new materials or using an OpenStax book, a semester seemed to be enough time for faculty to be able to work that into their current schedule. You also might be able to get around that as well if you can offer faculty some incentives to perhaps do some of the course transformation work over the summer if they're on academic contract. So that can be another option as well. But I think in terms of some of the steps, you know, once you've identified a faculty member and a course that you want to work with, I think the next biggest step is finding the resource that they want to use. And again, if you have something like OpenStax that's already available for that discipline, that's a really much easier process than if you are going to need to go to library resources and find open access journal articles or open access publications and kind of compile that. That type of project where you are putting something together on your own is going to require a little bit more time than if you can just pick something else up. But we found once we've been able to get faculty interested in the textbooks, or really either way interested, that, you know, we kind of tend to have a monthly check-in meeting. And so since I work as project manager with a lot of these teams, I try to check in with them, you know, monthly and say, okay, what are we doing? What are our next steps with this? What's our progress with this? Some of the other common issues that come up are things like hosting. And so if you are going to try to create something new, where is that going to go? That's another one of those questions that you need to answer. So like the link I posted earlier for what I did with my round 1 project with Affordable Learning Georgia, I had to have support and help from an instructional designer to set up that website and get permission from UGA to put that together and make sure that what we were creating worked with our intellectual property agreement that all the faculty signed. So some of those things are things that you may need to think about as you're putting something together. But I would say, you know, just a minimum of a semester between when you like go to start a project and when you want the project to go live in a course.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that the stipends we gave out were almost all of them were to faculty who had already sort of done a little work in that area, had already kind of pulled together some things, and they were not starting from scratch, and they weren't trying to create, you know, an entire textbook. So really, you would need. It's been clear that you need a longer lead time if you were really expecting people to produce an entire textbook, obviously. But I agree with that timeline. Semester is kind of minimum amount of time needed.
Thank you. Okay. So for those who aren't ready or don't have the time to replace the entire commercial textbook, or they're teaching a course where there isn't an open textbook available, what are some other opportunities that they might be encouraged to explore?
We really try to leverage our workshop schedule, and so we try to schedule some things each semester to give faculty an opportunity to perhaps come in and play. You know, if any of you guys are instructional designers, you know, like what we would call a sandbox course, just kind of a test environment. And so a lot of times when I am working with those types of workshops or leading them, I like to talk about, you know, what is open, and there's a good chance that you might already be doing something in your class with open source materials. So a lot of faculty are showing TED Talks or using things that are in public domain newspaper articles or historical documents. So a lot of those types of things kind of help pave the way for that conversation, I think, where when faculty realize, like, oh, it's not that odd, I have looked at Wikipedia before, you know, that they start going, okay, maybe open is not as scary as I originally thought. And so what we try to do in those workshops is, one, make them feel a little bit more comfortable with the idea of openness, and then really try to spend some time working together to look at the different resources that are available. If there's not a commercial textbook like OpenStax available for them, there may be some other things. So for us, and I would even say for you guys in Louisiana, looking at that Affordable Learning Georgia website of past projects, you can actually see the materials that people have created.
Oh, we just lost Deanna. Can folks hear me? Just raise your hands. Yes. Okay.
Has somebody else already put something
Deanna's
together
back.
for that?
There we go.
So yeah, I think there are a lot of ways to just begin that conversation and start working with faculty just to start thinking about that direction, even if they're not completely ready to go there.
Okay, and the other side of that is not just readiness, but willingness. And what are some of the main reasons that someone would not want to incorporate open ed resources into their teaching? And what are some of the things you can do to persuade them?
I think busyness is and time constraints are the things we get the most pushback on. I don't know when I would have time to do this or put something together. And so I think that's part of why being able to show them, like, the list of past recipients of the ALG grants where perhaps a similar course has already been done, or even just to kind of connect them with other faculty within the institution to say, you know, okay, you may not believe me when I am telling you I think it's going to take this much time. But they might believe it if they hear from somebody else who's still currently teaching, or someone else who has a strong presence on campus. But I think, you know, in general at this point, we have found that there are enough people who are willing to work with us that we're really trying to focus our efforts there right now. And so I think it's going to be, you know, probably a longer process to get to the point where everyone who wants to do it is doing it, and we're only left with the people who are resistant. But so far, yeah, in general, we've been able to really get a lot of support across our campus with our faculty.
I would agree with Deanna said about the time-consuming, the fear that there's just, they're not sure what would be involved in doing this, and everything I've read suggests that that's probably the #1 barrier for faculty to sort of move in this direction. I would say another concern that comes up is probably concerns about quality of the sources, or it's related to the time-consuming, that there's so much out there, how do I find the quality? And many faculty may not know that there are peer-reviewed, some of the sites provide peer reviews and ratings, and that kind of information about what's been adopted and used would be helpful to them to counter that idea that this is all just who knows who put this stuff up and how current is it, etc. So again, more information about the state of OER content and the tools that we have for selecting would counter that perception that quality is an issue. I mean, it certainly is, but that's also true of published textbooks and other sources. And then I would say there's probably also concern about accessibility, and that for their students, even though we think open is very accessible, that ADA accessibility issues. Again, most OER sites, the ones that are sort of vetted, are going to address those issues. And I would say also maybe concern about copyright and not sure what they're allowed to use, and but wading into some of those issues may be a deterrent for some faculty. But again, none of those are overwhelming issues in themselves. It's sort of the combination of all these things make it seem like it's more more barriers there than there are. So I think just making faculty aware, again, like Deanna said, showing others who have done it, showing that there are resources available and really useful tools for homing in on the quality relevant content that they can select from will go a long way. And having workshops and events where faculty can share with each other, I think is really invaluable. So people can see, oh, this is how you found something useful, and how might that work for me in my discipline. I wanted to say also, I did another webinar. It sounds like all I do all day is watch webinars on OER, but there have been a flurry of them recently, it seems, and there was one about consortial approaches, and they talked about collaborating across the state, faculty, and specific disciplines, like giving grants to faculty at different institutions in, say, biology, to sort of work together to work toward a free textbook, an open textbook that could be shared perhaps across the state, and that seems like a good idea too, and maybe something that we at Lewis would be in a particularly good position to support and explore.
I think quality is a really good point. There is a lot of research that's kind of being done now on quality that hopefully will be coming out, where we're looking at faculty and student perceptions of OER quality. And I think the other piece that can kind of speak to that is when we start being able to show empirical evidence of student outcomes and showing that our student learning outcomes are not negatively affected by using an OER. And I think that part, can kind of come, and obviously, something like OpenStax, where you can look at the front of the book and see, okay, all of these people were involved in the process, and yes, I've heard of them. That's much easier than just kind of something that is on a random website or someone put together, and who are these people. But I think that we're kind of moving in a direction where some of those concerns about quality are going to be addressed. And I know I'm going to be at the University System of Georgia Teaching and Learning Conference next week. And in the workshop I'm doing with one of my colleagues, we're actually going to have people who attend that workshop read samples from different books and see if, based on those samples, they can tell which one is the OER and which one is which one's a traditional textbook. And I think that should be a fun activity, but I would love to be able to do a broader project like that. But again, it's usually a question of funding. How can I incentivize faculty to get on board and read different things and review for quality? But I think there's a lot of conversations happening in the OER research world that are definitely heading in that direction.
Thank you. Those are the end of the prepared questions that we have for our panelists, but I really would like to open it up for folks to pose questions or share experiences right now. If you have a microphone available, we'd love to hear your voices. If not, please send your thoughts through the chat. You can also raise your hand if you want me to call on you.
Hello, is my sound working?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hi. I asked about this at Luck last semester, but it seems to be an issue that hasn't really gone away. Like, I don't really know, like, how much of a big deal textbook and journal pirating is, but there's actually been a well-known example earlier this year where someone in Russia, like, not just like somebody in the college dorm room or in a dark room somewhere that nobody knows about. Somebody publicly came out and said, I'm going to put all these pirated journals online, and that's the way it should be. And yeah, I think that might be it, Sci-Hub. And then young people, I guess I have to say it that way because I'm not as young as I used to be, but people will share links online to pirate websites, sometimes torrents, and sometimes just a plain old Russian website. And I actually tried to do this once and could get pretty far. And I went to this website and I was able to get like a textbook that normally costs money, but I was able to get some sort of copy of it. And yeah, there was a bunch of ads. You can sort of tell the site is not legit, but you can actually go there and do it. So I wonder how much does this actually happen? And do publishers care? Do institutions care that students, especially probably the smart ones, because you have to kind of know how to really use a computer to do this, like torrents. Like nobody knows how to use a torrent except for like certain people. So they're downloading, you know, movies and music and textbooks illegally, and I never would have guessed that would be a thing maybe 10 years ago, but it still is now. And actually, they pirate popular books too. So is this something that can be presented as a solution to that problem? Because it seems that with textbooks costing so much, students have been told, well, you have to buy this $200 textbook. Some students have said, well, no, I'm not going to do that. And that's their solution.
Right, Karen. And for those of you that were at the e-learning summit yesterday, we had a couple of student representatives talk about the strategies they use to acquire textbooks. And we had wonderful students who were not pirating textbooks, but we did bring that topic up that we in the library often see them with their cell phone cameras snapping photographs of pages or the problems that they have to submit for the day. So I think you are definitely hitting something we care about in the library.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting seeing the reaction to the Sci-Hub and Sci-Hub affair, how to refer to it, in the library community, because, you know, there's outrage that people are pirating, and we know this is, you know, violating copyright. At the same time, much of the use of that site has been, you know, third world countries that have major access barriers to content that we don't even experience here in this country. And so the conversation has been, well, let's take a step back and talk about how the entire system is broken. And while we don't condone illegal activities, we want to change the foundation of how this kind of content is shared and communicated, move it into the open legally, have, you know, authors, and here again is where faculty authors of textbooks, faculty authors of scholarship are key to thinking about the choices they make and how they disseminate their research and keeping part of their copyright, et cetera. So I think you're right, the publishers do care. I mean, they cared when Georgia State tried to, in its mind, legally make course content available, and they were sued, and that's you know, gone up on appeal. So we know the publishers care a lot. It's harder for them to probably catch the student, you know, scanning a textbook and sharing it, but they are paying attention to what institutions and libraries are doing for sure. And then, you know, they brought suit against Sci-Hub, Elsevier, and I'm not sure which the other publishers. So it's definitely they're protecting, you know, their content, and so what we're saying is don't steal that. Just change the terms under which this is produced and shared, so it's not an issue, you know.
I think, too, there are separate issues with academic journal articles versus textbooks. And you are starting to see a lot of the major federal funding coming through, like from NIH and NSF, where they require that if you publish based on the work of that grant, that it has to be published in an open access format. So I think as you start seeing more of that, the journal articles, I think are moving in that direction, and particularly as faculty start looking at, you know, submitting their work and submitting their articles to journals that are going to be open access and just increase readership. When I talk to faculty about that, one of the things I say is we know that the average, you know, kind of traditional academic journal, like the article, any article that gets published that we spend all of this time and work on is only going to get read, you know, like have 2 views ever, 2 or 3 views. And I know for me, for my work, that's going to be like my family members, my grandma, my mom, hey, look, you wrote something and it was published somewhere. And so when you start looking at an open access journal, you're looking at the average number of views per article is 18. And so when you start talking to faculty about, like, do you want your research to get out there? Do you want your ideas out there? You can really start making a case for why they should consider publishing with open access journals. So I know more about that than I do about the pirated textbooks for sure, but I just wanted to at least mention that I think there's a fairly decent push within research to get journals more open as we move forward.
I want to roll back in the chat to a question that Margaret Keller posed just a little bit earlier about working with bookstore and publisher contracts and restrictions, and how those issues have been dealt with. And anybody that wants to chime in here on your situation with your bookstore and contracts, please do.
We really haven't bumped into that much at UGA. So far, our bookstore has been really supportive, and we've let them know. And so, like, for our classes that are using, like, OpenStax textbooks, you know, the bookstore's stocking some of the hard copies of those to be available for students. But we have not, so far at least with the courses that we've been working with, we have not run into any issues with publishing contracts.
I'll just here at UNO, we've been trying to get a textbook list from our bookstore, and just had trouble with that. They didn't refuse it, but there was a lot of back and forth clarification, and they brought up the non-compete that if they give us a list, we can't share it with competitors, and we had to explain that we're going to use a library vendor to try to buy these. And so there were some questions, but it looks like they are going to give us the list. I have heard other institutions, the bookstore, refusing to share that list. So I know other bookstores have been more than cooperative. Not only do they give the list, they support efforts to help students, actively help students find alternatives and so forth. So I think that you get a range of response depending on the kind of bookstore and the nature of the corporate stance on this kind of practice. As far as licensing content and using that, I wanted to point out, that we encourage faculty to link to our licensed content in courses, however they want to use it. But a couple years ago, Harvard Business Review announced that libraries would not be allowed to link to their content in courses, and so there's an attempt to sort of encroach on that license. As far as I know, the only publication in the EBSCO database, full text, that there's a particular license forbidding that kind of use. Even though we've paid for it, I think they would want libraries to purchase a separate license to make Harvard Business Review content available to courses. So there was a big hue and cry, and so it's, as long as the publishers own the copyright, even if they license, it's still on their terms. So really, again, the long-term solution is to take back ownership and not give away that content, and then be sort of at the mercy of their not largesse, but what they see is what would benefit their bottom line, and that's how we have access to that content, most of which is produced by our own, academic faculty. So anyway, not to go on and on, let others speak.
I think there are a couple of you out there who've had direct experience with the bookstore. I'll wait a minute to see if you want to pipe in. Tim, I see your hand up.
Sure, Terry. I was just going to share, Delgado is a Barnes & Noble bookstore, and we did have some similar challenges to other schools in trying to get the bookstore list of ISBNs, just to run a comparison. The first thing, I know it was brought up yesterday in the summit for those of you who were there, libraries never were included in that no compete clause. We do have a no compete clause with our Barnes & Noble, but taking the electronic formatting out of it, it never was considered competition to buy all the same books for schools that did that from every course at the college or university, and include those in the collection or include those in the reserve collection, for students and faculty to use. That was never considered something that was viewed as competition because we're not selling them. But for some reason, when you put the electronic book or the electronic publication in, it puts a different spin on things for the bookstore. And I'm not saying we were 100% successful in getting that list. We did have to involve our provost, and another great ally for you might be, or for other people might be, the Student Government Association. There is legislation out there, and many of the student government associations have taken it upon themselves to publish those lists of currently used textbooks each semester to be in compliance with that legislation, that you are offering those ISBN numbers to students to go out and see if they can find a less expensive, I guess you could say, version of that book. So it's not perfect, but that's just some ways we were able to have maybe limited or 2/3 success of getting that information that we needed from the bookstore.
Thank you, Tim. And I see Francesca has her hand up as well. Okay. Anyone else want to pose a question of one of our panelists or share a story? Okay, I don't see anything coming in. So with that, a really big thank you to our...
Well,
we've got one.
Hang on, just one last question. Okay,
great. This is Karen.
We're trying to do something with the Lewis grant and get some and acquire some resources that could be used by faculty. We decided not to go with the stipend idea because we want to be able to acquire new resources to put into our e-library. And the stipend option is one where you use open education resources that already exist, but we want to get new ones or some DRM-free textbooks that are new. However, is having the stipend around a necessary carrot to entice faculty to participate? Because getting faculty attention and participation is already difficult. And then asking them to work together with us on something to get new resources is something that's maybe interesting to them, but the only way to make them do it might be to hand them $200. And I'm afraid that if we go with the regular option of just saying we want to pick up some new DRM-free textbooks for y'all to use for your classrooms, that I fear that wouldn't be enough. I fear that we'll get those textbooks and nobody will use them. They'll be like, hey, great idea, walk out the door, and then not do anything after that. So do we really need to give them the stipend in order to ensure that they'll do something?
Well, I'll just say what we did at UNO real briefly. The stipends were specifically for not purchasing a textbook, but for adopting and creating OER. And I'll say that we actually, when we sent the initial email out, we had all these options. We'll buy a text for you. You can create your own textbook. And I do think it was a confusing. We tried to make it very clear, but it was kind of a long email, and I think it was hard for faculty to digest. Later in the summer, when we just had a few responses to that initial email, we sent a separate email that just said, let us buy your textbook, an electronic version. We put that in the subject line, and it was very brief, and it was just focused on purchasing the e-text, and we got way more hit. Even though it was in the middle of the summer, we got way more response to that because that was kind of a very clear. So I think it's fine to just do that. In fact, at some point, I kind of wondered if we should have separated those two initiatives, because the OER one, for faculty who had not really encountered that idea, I think it was confusing, and it was hard to get all those options out. So I think it would be fine to maybe do those two separate initiatives possibly, because one of them is very simple and it's very easy for a faculty member to send you an ISBN or a title and you just tell them whether you can buy it or not. The other one involves a little more back and forth, a little more context. That's my 2 cents.
And I'm pointing to this story in the Volume 2, Issue 2 of the Lanyap, page 6. You'll see Jeanne and Brian Sherman address how they used that grant money this past year. Stipend money, sorry, not grant.
I could chime in a little bit about Affordable Learning Georgia, because I bet some of you might have heard the $5,000 maximum per faculty member and went, wow, that's a lot of money. The way that we came up with that figure is we were looking at what would cover a course release for 1 semester. The grants function both as an incentive for people to get involved in affordable learning materials, including OER, but it also functions as support. So maybe you're paying for you to teach a 3-4 course load as opposed to a 4-4 course load. Or maybe you're hiring an instructional designer because you have to teach a maximum amount of courses and you need somebody to help out on the back end and manage the project. And of course, if you're going to create any resources, and you may find out halfway through your review process that you have to create things like this, how far are you going with it? Do you need design help? Do you need hosting help? And then past that point, do you want it peer reviewed? Could you provide incentives to peers to review the textbook? It's both supporting the time and the resources needed in order to implement OER, and that goes just as well into adoption as it does with adaptation and creation.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other discussion questions? Well, I thank everyone for their time today, and Jamie will be following up with a link to the recording that you can share out with your colleagues who missed this session today. And a big round of applause. You can put your hands up in the air for our panelists today, and also a big thank you to Affordable Learning Georgia, as they have been supporting Lewis as we learn about these very important opportunities. Thank you.
And thanks to Lewis, too. It's been great partnering with you guys and sharing our information. It's been very informative to us and a great way for us to reach out.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.